When you're deciding how you should publish your book, what are the key considerations, even before you start writing? Hi, everybody. I'm Rikki Heller from rikkiheller.com. I'm a writer, editor, and book coach, and I want to help you write your book so you can get your ideas out into the world and share them with people who want to know what you have to say. So today, when you talk about the whole publishing process, one of the questions I get asked all the time is, should I self-publish or should I go with the publisher? And there are so many considerations around that topic, but I think one of the most important, and so I'm going to talk about that one today because I can't talk about them all, but one of the most important considerations is time. And depending on a few things to do with your time, these are things you need to know and you need to consider before you even start writing, before you even start thinking about how you're going to ultimately publish your book. Okay, so the first one is pretty obvious. How much time do you have? And by that I mean, how much time do you have to devote to this process? A lot of people tell me that they're worried they're not going to have enough time to write their book. Well, if you're also going to self-publish your book, then you're adding a lot of time to that process, because not only are you the writer and the editor and the book designer, you're also going to be the publisher and the marketer, right? Whereas if you're working with a conventional publisher, they take care of all of the sort of technical aspects and all of the aspects of creating the physical copies of the book and distributing them too. So this can be covered to some extent by hybrid publishers, but you got to be really careful with hybrid publishers because they're not all above board, and it's tough to find one that isn't going to overcharge you and not necessarily and sometimes not necessarily deliver. So be really careful. There are good ones out there. I'm not saying don't ever use a hybrid publisher, but that's just something to consider. So how much time do you have? And then the second sort of aspect of that same question is, how much of that time are you willing to give? So are you willing to spend the time? You might have it, but is this something that you're willing to put your focus on? Some people have the capability to, let's say, design the book, create the formatting, all of those things, but they just don't want to do that. It's not their area of expertise. They don't want to get involved in that. They have no desire to do that. All they want to do is the writing. And once they get that book written, they're done, they're finished. And so I find a lot of my clients, I can refer them to people who can do the formatting for them, people who can get the book up on Amazon for them, people who can design the book cover for them. And that way they don't have to worry about anything except actually writing the book. It takes a lot of weight off their minds, even though theoretically they could have done that work themselves. So that's something to think about in terms of your time and where are you willing to put your energies and your attention while you're writing this book, because much of that begins while you're still writing your book. So you're going to have slightly split attention if you're thinking about the marketing and you're also thinking about the writing at the same time. I think even with a conventional publisher, we do need to think about marketing, but there's just more help there than you would get entirely on your own. And then the third aspect of time is, I'm going to put it like this: how long are you willing to wait? Because when you work with a conventional publisher, the first step is always, unless you can find a really small publisher who's willing to take unknown names or people who are just writing to them without an agent, but that's not that common these days. So normally what you would need to do is first acquire an agent. And that process requires going through what's called the proposal process. So you create a written proposal, which some people say is more work than the book itself. Honestly, I've heard writers say that. I've done 2 proposals now for 2 of my 4 books. The other 2, I was just asked to write those books, so I didn't have to do a full proposal. But a proposal can be anywhere from 15 to 40 pages. And it's really an in-depth explanation for the publisher and the agent of what your book is, what it's all about, who you are, what you're all about, how you're going to market it, because a conventional publisher wants to know, how are you going to help guarantee sales of the book? I mean, really, their bottom line is sales, right? So the first step is to acquire an agent, because an agent is the intermediary between you and the publisher. The agent is the person who is going to help you find a publisher who wants your book, who's going to be willing to support the book as best they can. So that process requires a proposal. The agent reads the proposal, they decide if they are interested in talking to you further, and then they get back to you. Well, so there's the time involved in writing the proposal. There's the time involved in sending out all your proposals to different agents, waiting until they get back to you. And then that's the real beginning of the process. When an agent takes you on, then they will begin to go and shop the book around at different publishers. If you're lucky enough to get a contract with a conventional publisher, how long are you willing to wait? Because at that point, you're waiting for the book to be produced and set loose in the world. So from the time you sign to the time the book is actually published and released, it can be anywhere from a year, which I think is incredibly short for a conventional publisher, to 2 years. Somewhere around 18 months seems to be what's common these days. In my case, it was closer to 2 years when my books were published, because they were older and things were slower back then. But even a year from the time that you hand in that manuscript to the time that the book is published, that can feel like a long time for people, especially if you have material that's really up to the minute, really current, that you want your audience to have right away. So this is definitely not meant to be a recommendation for self-publishing. It's not always the best thing, because there are lots of advantages to working with a conventional publisher, but I do think you need to consider how much time's involved. That's one of the major considerations. There are others, like I said, like how much control over the process do you want, how much profit is involved, how do you get paid, all those things. But I think one of the first considerations for me would be, where do I want to put my time, and how much time do I have for this process, and how much time am I willing to wait to see that book in print? So I hope that's helpful. I hope it helps you make a decision if you're thinking about starting a book and you're wondering, how am I going to publish this book? For more information like this, I post a newsletter every week where I talk about these kinds of things, as well as stories around writing, finding ideas, my writing history, anecdotes, and the occasional, of course, adorable dog picture, because I am a crazy dog lady after all, as well as being a writer. So I hope that was useful. If you'd like to subscribe, just go to rickyheller.com/subscribe, and I will see you there. And I'll also see you again back here next time. Take care, everybody.